2023 has been a great year for video games, with plenty of all-time classics launching throughout these past few months. Games like Baldur's Gate 3, Street Fighter 6, Hi-Fi Rush, Star Wars Jedi Survivor, Final Fantasy 16, Pikmin 4, Armored Core 6, and The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom have earned plenty of critical acclaim, alongside remakes like Resident Evil 4 and Dead Space. Unfortunately, with every success that occurs within the gaming industry, there's disappointment too. Hello and welcome to Retrocade. Here's the 12 most disappointing games of 2023. Starting at number 12, we have Atomic Heart. Initially looking like a spiritual successor to Irrational Games' BioShock series, Atomic Heart ultimately never quite reached those lofty heights. Set in an alternate reality Soviet Union in the 1950s, players face off against robotic and biomechanical experiments that have turned rogue at a location known as Facility 3826. While the premise may be interesting, most players and critics agreed that it didn't reach the heights of BioShock, as combat and progression systems ultimately felt underwhelming when compared to other games in the genre. Worse yet, the Xbox version of Atomic Heart suffered from technical and performance issues related to its frame rates, as well as a variety of general gameplay bugs.
South, the whole world might end!
Next at number 11, we have Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. Even though the Call of Duty franchise continues to be a cash cow for Activision, Modern Warfare 3 really stumbled more than usual at launch. Things didn't start off well after fans got early access to the Modern Warfare 3 campaign, which had plenty of excitement leading up to its launch. Unfortunately, the campaign left fans largely disappointed due to a good chunk of it feeling like filler, relying heavily on content taken from Warzone, and is ultimately a very short 4-hour campaign. The idea of open combat missions also didn't sit well with many, which removed a lot of the tense, action-heavy set pieces that the Call of Duty campaigns have been known for. Still, for a game with a premium price tag, some have found the price point a tough pill to swallow, especially as the launch version of Modern Warfare 3 felt more like an expansion than a full-fledged game. And how crazy it is that a free DLC of this game is longer than this game's whole campaign.
Watch it.
Next at number 10, we have Cities, Skylines 2. As a follow-up to a fan-favorite city builder that had years of post-launch content and community modding support, players likely assumed that it would be feature-rich on day one, continuing to build off what its predecessor had started. Unfortunately, things quickly fell off of the rails, as players discovered the game was missing content that the original game eventually received post-launch like airports. Upon release, it suffered from notable technical issues, including confirmation from developer Colossal Order that the game wouldn't be hitting its ideal performance benchmark at launch. Players looking forward to the console release were also informed that the PlayStation and Xbox versions were suddenly delayed, with a new launch window of spring 2024. Next we have Forspoken. When it was first announced, Forspoken had plenty going for it at Luminous Productions, thanks to the pedigree of individuals working on it, which included the likes of Amy Hennig, Todd Stashwick, and Gary Whitta handling the writing. Unfortunately, the game's development would eventually experience numerous rough patches, including various game delays and other problems prior to launch. Even mentioned that Forspoken's story underwent heavy edits and revisions throughout development, ultimately looking nothing like the original pitch. A few months after release, Square Enix announced that the game had failed to hit sales expectations and that Luminous Productions would be absorbed back into the company to essentially become a support studio.
Calls us Gollum. What is it, precious? The precious, of course. The precious we once
At number 8, we have Lord of the Rings Gollum. While there was plenty of excitement for a game centered around the Lord of the Rings character Gollum, no one could have expected just how bad of a game it would become. Part of the disappointment is the fact that it misuses one of the best-known IPs in the Lord of the Rings, a series created by J.R.R. Tolkien that has experienced plenty of success through movie adaptations, video games, and more. Beyond that, another big problem is that the game suffered from a large amount of technical and gameplay-related issues as well, with its graphics being worse than many classic, older games. In addition to the poorly received game, upsetting details eventually surfaced regarding the toxic work environment, unpaid overtime for its employees, and mismanagement by leadership, eventually leading to the studio shutting down entirely. Naturally, it quickly went on to become one of the worst games of 2023.
The Lord sent me, his emissary, to oversee.
Next up at number 7, we have Payday 3. The latest entry in the popular bank heist franchise, Payday 3 continued the story of the crew at the conclusion of the second game. Moving into a more modern area to take advantage of advanced surveillance and the topic of cryptocurrency, the hype behind the co-op shooter quickly faded away due to an extremely messy and poor launch for Payday 3. With an always online requirement even when playing solo, the servers couldn't handle the rush of new players, causing countless errors, performance, and technical issues. A month after launch, Payday 3 saw its player base largely disappear, with platforms like Steam showing that Payday 2's concurrent player population was 10 times greater. Compounding things was the fact that Embracer Group came out in November, putting the future of the series in doubt.
Bit by bit, the town was swallowed up.
Next at number 6, we have Redfall. Coming from a developer with a good track record, especially with the last few game releases including Deathloop, Redfall was likely seen by many as another easy win for the studio, but it ultimately dropped the ball. After experiencing multiple delays, Redfall launched to extremely poor reviews from both critics and fans alike. In fact, the launch was so bad, even Phil Spencer opened up about Redfall's poor reception and how disappointing things were in general. With plenty of bugs bogging down the overall experience, players were also met with inconsistent AI behavior, shallow gameplay mechanics, and a limited pool of weapons to pick from. Along with a lack of 60 FPS at launch, players also took issue with the looter-shooter elements, character abilities, and RPG mechanics not being very engaging or rewarding to use. Next at number 5, we have Skull Island, Rise of Kong. Even though expectations were already fairly low for this game, there is something to be said for a release that fumbles even that. Letting fans play as the iconic character King Kong as he explores Skull Island, Rise of Kong launched to very little in the way of marketing or buzz. Reviews of Rise of Kong were extremely poor with both critics and fans alike, noting an extensive number of bugs, terrible graphics, and ultimately boring gameplay. The biggest disappointment with Skull Island, Rise of Kong, is that it ultimately wastes a popular IP, one that has been gaining plenty of acclaim as of late, thanks to big kaiju movie adaptations like Godzilla vs. Kong and the recent Apple Plus series Monarch, Legacy of Monsters. Next at number 4, we have The Walking Dead, Destinies. Utilizing a popular and massive IP, The Walking Dead seems like an intriguing idea on paper, letting players essentially rewrite the series' history by changing who lives and dies. Unfortunately, the end result left a lot to be desired. Just like The Rise of Kong, The Walking Dead, Destinies turned out to be one of the worst games released in 2023. The third-person action game features plenty of iconic characters, like Rick Grimes and Daryl Dixon, retelling critical moments from the early seasons of the AMC show, though most of the other aspects of the game are viewed as being hilariously bad. Combat is clunky, with boss battles typically involving bullet sponge-style enemies, while the character animations are clunky and stiff, with graphics that look outdated by 10 years.
That tank!
Next at number 3, we have Starfield. Let's be honest with ourselves, no one was expecting those games to be GOTY contenders. It's hard to be disappointed with a game when the bar was already so low, so let's instead talk about a game that raised a lot more expectations instead, like Starfield. Bethesda's first new IP in decades, Starfield was looking set to be the next big blockbuster for both Bethesda and Microsoft as a whole, but now, a few months after the game has launched, Starfield has seemingly faded from the public consciousness. The fact that Skyrim has had more players on Steam recently than Starfield says it all about how much staying power this space RPG really had. While no one would say that Starfield is a bad game, as the improvements made to the gunplay and movement over a game like Fallout are immediately noticeable, playing Starfield means accepting a reality that their depiction of space is mostly empty and boring. The majority of the planets and moons are just barren landmasses, with the occasional ancient ruin or pirate outpost scattered every 500 meter to a kilometer apart.
Sir?
At number 2, we have Immortals of Aveum. It's always great when first-person shooters try to do something different with the core formula, which is why Immortals of Aveum seemed so interesting from the outset. Instead of shooting guns, players wielded magical spells to defeat their enemies
Atlas Fallen.
in a campaign that could only be described as Call of Divination. Despite the out-of-this-world, magical premise, however, many critics decried Immortals of Aveum as being a bit too formulaic, which is practically a death sentence for any game that's trying to make you invest heavily in its fantastical premise. Poor in-game performance at launch only exacerbated the problems for Immortals of Aveum, and weak overall sales led to nearly half of the developers at Ascendant Studio being laid off, something that had become a theme during the year.
Last I was here was about 10 years ago. Much has happened.
And first in our list is Atlas Fallen. Deck 13 had made a decent name for themselves in the past, largely thanks to their work on the sci-fi Souls-like series The Surge, which carved a wonderful niche within the hardcore AA space. It's no wonder that some were excited about the potential of this game, which looked set to be more of a AA release fully backed by Focus. Despite an impressive-looking reveal trailer, and the promise of an open-world action RPG that boasted fun traversal and unique combat failed to capture the attention of pretty much anyone when it launched. From the story to the world and its gameplay is just bland, showing good ideas with poor execution.
For the worthy to live in Thelos' light.
Well, that's it for this video. Hope 2024 is going to be a great year for games. See you soon.